Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two of our new platform series talking about what's new in K2. Today, we're going to be focusing on how we can transform your SharePoint environment. My name's Bree Houston, and today I'll be guiding us all along on this journey as we take a look at what's new in K2 and SharePoint. As we get started, I really like to start out with our mission as an organization, and that is to automate every process in every organization. And just to give you an idea, we have a really broad range here of how we want to empower our users to build applications across the enterprise. And that could be mission critical applications that are solving a critical need across your organization, all the way to a departmental app that might be much more simple but targeted to getting information for a particular need or process. And we really want to do so by empowering those users to go and do a lot of things themselves by the knowledge that's available and also the tooling that's available through K2. So what are people currently using the K2 tooling in order to do across their organizations? One of the first things that we see quite often is building mission critical applications. And one example here is Guy's in St. Thomas, a healthcare company that has over 1,500 employees with 2 million patents. And what we see here is that there's a lot of regulation and compliance that needs to be handled for in some of those applications. And with a tooling like K2, there's applications such as employee self-service, HR optimization, and many more that are really benefiting from process automation and optimization. On another side, we have a credit union called First West Credit Union with over 240,000 members. So you can imagine the number of applications or mortgage originations that might occur in a given calendar year. So you can see that things like membership process, estate planning are really benefits that are going straight back to the end users, the members of that credit union, all functioning through K2 and becoming a lot more optimized for that particular process. And then as we look at the actual time benefit to those members, we can see a new member process that used to take hours being reduced down to less than 40 minutes. So again, a better user experience for those members as they're engaging in that new membership process. And then all the way through how we scale across the enterprise. And that starts with things like a center of excellence, and Shell is a really great example of how that would work. And so here we're really seeing K2 at scale across an enterprise solution to handle mission critical applications with over 750,000 cases a year in different applications and around 2,000 cases a day with growing numbers and about each quarter growing by about 10 workflow applications. So really a huge deployment of K2 that's able to accommodate for things like SLAs, staff onboarding and offboarding, things that are very time sensitive and critical in order to quickly meet the regulations that are in place across this type of business. And then continuing kind of that scale theme, another customer we have is Kimberly Clark. And the graph on the right really does a great job of showing how an organization can really build and deploy applications over time and really get the best benefit back from a K2 deployment. And here I really like this quote. Our organization is building 8 to 10 apps a month on K2 with a running total of over 600 apps currently completed. So you can imagine the sheer number of instances that are going to be started, how the organization actually benefits from that, and continuing to develop applications even quicker to really accommodate new needs across the business and quickly satisfy those needs for those business units. Okay, so that's enough of kind of the K2 overview of some of the things that are really more K2 platform specific. But let's dive even a little bit deeper and start talking about kind of what this means not only in kind of K2, but also in a SharePoint environment. So as we look at K2 customer outcomes, we're able to see that customers are able to reduce their dev time by 78%. There's a ginormous return on investment of over 400%, and the net value of that deployment as well. So when we're talking about a SharePoint deployment, some of the challenges that we maybe see traditionally there are being able to really adopt that SharePoint deployment and get the best utilization out of where things are kind of created, creating some governance around who can do what and when they can do it, and also bringing some visibility to those applications. So one thing that we're able to do, I think when it comes to that, is really centralize that user experience, whether it's within a SharePoint site collection, whether we're referencing that site collection or even multiple sites. That's all something that feeds into some of this customer outcome data as we're able to create a better solution for the people that are actually going to be utilizing any of the applications across the organization. And when we look at K2 and certainly how we interact with SharePoint and our SharePoint users, we really don't fit into any one category or any one type of process. We're really about kind of landing maybe in one business unit and expanding quickly across your organization. And this is really to unify that user experience, to bring kind of data silos together. So certainly you might have departmental silos within your current SharePoint deployment with tough access to data that you might need for a read-only versus being able to edit. And so what we really want to do here is take each one of those departments and every application that might be really specific to things that they need to do in their role and unify them together so it's a complete application that really services those end users much, much better than what they might be experiencing today. And this next slide kind of talks to all of the different kind of integrations that we have. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the kind of core components are with K2, how they relate to these. And certainly as we're looking specifically at SharePoint and Office 365 Online, that's going to be where we're focused today. But know that we have some similar integrations across other line of business systems, even across having multiple in a single K2 deployment. And there's a lot of power behind a unified interface for your end users to be able to go and interact with all of this data and line of business systems from one central location. And you can see here, that all is encompassed by a K2 Smart Object. So that allows us to create a K2 common object that describes maybe a list within SharePoint, maybe a library with documents, and being able to leverage maybe the metadata in a K2 common language and reuse it in multiple applications across the enterprise. And that also brings us into our SharePoint integration. So there's a few different flavors of SharePoint that we integrate with, whether, and we'll get into your choice of deployment later, but it's important to know that we can work with that Office 365 deployment, your SharePoint on-premises deployment. It's really your choice and your need as to which one you are going to use as a K2 line of business integration. And you're not just limited by one. You can actually go and integrate with more than one of those deployments, and you're able to span, maybe different parts of your organization based on how you've deployed SharePoint. Maybe you have one version that's, you're on-prem and you're in a migration to your cloud instance. K2 can really handle for that situation and making sure that you're not having to do a lot of repetitive application building when you're in that scenario. So the workflows in SharePoint, we also have a set of tools that allow you to interact straight through that SharePoint interface with drag and drop tooling to quickly configure your forms, your workflows, and interact with lists, libraries, and different environments that really span, again, that deployment without having to create individual deployments. You can have access to your entire tenant kind of from one location. And then forms and extended UI in SharePoint. This is really important here because the K2 Workflow Designer isn't an engine that's built on top of another workflow technology. It's actually our own workflow engine that then goes and integrates with SharePoint as a line of business system. So there's no dependency on those components in order for a K2 solution to be built or function. Rather, it's able to be reused across different line of business systems, different artifacts within SharePoint, so that you're creating, again, a level of reuse across your deployment. Okay, so we've kind of established that data integration layer, and certainly when it comes to the SharePoint integration, but what are those other components that are really critical parts of a business process automation platform and certainly K2 solutions? So that kind of brings us to, first of all, our feature-rich forms. So this is how your end users are going to interact with that data that lives kind of behind the scenes. So this could be that SharePoint list artifact. It could be a library. It could be multiple. You might have a CRM that might pull account information, and then in this case, maybe a quote that actually stores the information within your SharePoint deployment. The next piece is going to be our powerful workflows. You can see here the design canvas that allows you to quickly drag and drop shapes. And this is actually going to mirror in the design time a runtime that gives you kind of a status update as something progresses through a workflow approval process. So you have the visibility to where a process might be stuck at a point of time and who needs to take action in order to complete that process. And then last but not least is going to be our deeper insights. So process reporting and other reports that allow you to dive into where bottlenecks might exist throughout your process and start to do some trends analysis to improve your process or to see as a business what are the activities that might be delaying approvals or are causing a process to take a significant amount of time in order to go through an approval. So just a few examples of those four components together: loan origination, policy approvals, pricing resolution, travel request, incident management. These are all really great examples of K2 solutions that are built in order to bring integration, feature-rich forms, powerful workflows, and deeper insights all together on one platform. And then the K2 process automation platform. As I mentioned, we have kind of four core components and tenants, and that's again going to be our workflows, our forms, integration, and analytics. And when it comes to our SharePoint deployment, and you'll see this today, there's a lot of parity between what a user might be used to in that SharePoint experience and really integrating K2 into that experience without forcing them to kind of relearn something that they might be really familiar with, all the way through, replacing those deep linkings across your SharePoint deployment, maybe surfacing up an application at the top level of your site collection through a work list that really allows the process to be started anywhere on your deployment and a user to interact with work that they need to get done. So then there's also some supporting actors here, and those are really going to aid those kind of four core components in establishing a process automation platform that can really handle all of the needs of the business. So this could be accessibility when a user is on the go rather than logging into your SharePoint deployment. They might want to do that, or they might want to access via the K2 mobile device, see the tasks that are assigned to them, and take quick action. The next one is security and governance. So making sure that we are keeping all of your information secure as it's passed through that SharePoint. And we do that by adhering to the authentication mechanisms of those integrations. So in the SharePoint world, we're going to use that OAuth standard in order to make sure that that user is properly authenticated within K2 as well as SharePoint. And then our deployment, we talked a little bit about that. So whether you're deployed into the cloud or on premises, you have a lot of flexibility and certainly flexibility in what type of SharePoint environment you want to integrate with. And then we haven't talked about this, but pre-built apps are going to be another way that you can get deployed very quickly and be off and running with those applications. And so as we dive into the powerful workflows without code, this designer is going to be a visually complex or simple workflow depending on the needs of that particular project. And what that's going to do is allow you to incorporate business rules in order to handle for a more robust application or to keep it very simplified for an application that doesn't need that level of logic. And process is really going to be driven by things like escalations and reminders so that the process, again, is adhering to those strict SLAs. And this is an experience that we actually are going to be able to embed within SharePoint linking so that the user doesn't have to navigate to, again, a new location in order to get their work done. And those escalations are going to show up in their email or wherever you've kind of configured them in order to get that work done. So then the next is going to be our feature-rich forms. And again, this is going to be an experience that's embedded within the SharePoint deployment. You're going to have a list of assets that you're able to click on and come into this experience to configure new actions within the logic of the form in order to perform calculations or to get data populated into the entry. And then also building a form once and being able to reuse it across different areas, across your SharePoint deployment, across mobile, so that you're not rebuilding forms for every process or for different interfaces. And then finally, this is kind of the part that I was talking about, being able to take that smart form that you built within K2 with the multiple data integration layers and being able to embed it within that SharePoint experience, whether you're doing it in kind of a site level or maybe through the linking of a SharePoint list artifact itself and using K2 Smart Forms. We're going to cover that in today's demonstration. And this next part covers integration. So today for us, it's really going to be focused around the Office, or I should say rather SharePoint 2013. And what's nice there is it's not a big change from Office 365 back to your SharePoint on-prem instance with the how you go and design those applications. So again, your choice of deployment is not going to affect how you build those solutions around a SharePoint deployment. And the smart objects are really at the core of how that's possible. Again, the Smart object is really going to describe that list in SharePoint, that library in SharePoint, and all of the metadata. So if you have, a requester column or a date column, we're going to have that as a control in K2 that we can drag and drop onto a view so a user is able to interact with the data. They could populate a date. We could do it systematically on the load of the form. Or they could capture information, in the entry as well as populate information in, say, a dropdown from another data source so that they're entering correct information before they submit that entry back to the proper line of business system. Again, updating your SharePoint list, creating a new entry, and kind of tying it all together with K2. And then the last part of kind of those four core components is going to be our analytics. So being able to dive a little bit deeper into what's happening across that deployment. And certainly this is then a report that I can surface up in that K2 Smart Form in a site collection to give my end users a little bit more detail about what's happening, or maybe I want to keep it to managers of the process. I can use permissions in order to do so and make sure that everyone's getting the information that they need at the right point of time. And you can see that I can start to drill down into my individual tasks. So I can see how many I have active, which ones are maybe overdue, how many are escalated, and really determine which work needs to get done kind of the quickest. And again, going to embedded smart forms within that SharePoint environment, it's a really powerful tool when it comes to the visibility to your managers or your end users and getting the information. And then finally, there's also a way through kind of third-party tooling such as Power BI that we're able to pass in information from our SharePoint deployment, from our workflow audit data, and create really robust reporting within Power BI. And we also give you a set of templates to kind of get you started quickly. So it's kind of plug and play, and then these are even embeddable back into smart forms or into your SharePoint deployment so that you can do even richer reporting around what's happening in that process or multiple processes. Okay, and then the last four tenets we're going to move through a little bit more speedily. So mobile is going to be something that really gives your end users access to any processes in flight, an ability to take advantage of mobile capabilities such as capture or annotation, and we're able to interact again to write back to those line of business systems all through those K2 Smart Forms. Our next topic here is going to be security and governance. So making sure that we have centralized solutions and integrated management, able to kind of control down to our categories who has access to design, to start a process, to see different process overviews, and certainly surface up process owners. And then finally, ISO 27001 certified, which we're very proud of within the last little bit. So you're in good hands with K2. And then our choice of deployment. I mentioned this earlier, and I think this is a really critical piece as well. So when it comes to K2, just because you want to be fully cloud, or maybe you still want to deploy on premises because that's what your business has always done, we give you the option to really do either one of those deployments. So you're going to get the same security updates and upgrades and the ability to scale. You're going to get support as well as compliance and security. And it's the same set of toolings and capabilities in either one of those deployments. So you don't have to sacrifice big features between K2 Cloud and K2 5. You get the same great features and functionality. And then that brings us to pre-built apps. So this is going to be a new enhanced feature with K2 that allows you to kind of quickly build up those applications and be off and going, or take an existing application such as an IT service request, employee service, and download and quickly deploy that to your environment. And that's all done through some K2 tooling called package and deployment. And then if that application is maybe 80 to 90% of the application you would build from scratch, you can go in, make your customizations, publish it out, and be off and going very quickly. So again, that was kind of the K2 process automation platform in a nutshell. So our 4 core tenets there, or 8 tenets, I should say, with our 4 kind of pillars of workflow, forms, integration, and analytics, and then our supporters, mobile, security, and governance, deployment, and pre-built apps. But we're not just a software company. And I think that's also a really important thing to note. So our focus is really on customer success and how we do that after the sale. And it's really through a couple of organizations internally. So we have professional services that are really at the core of how we get our customers up and going very quickly. Some different ways that we're able to get you training, mentoring, even all the way through custom development and delivery. The next thing that we have is our global support. So different ways that you can have a different way to get support and get help when you reach something within your K2 deployment. And then our Center of Excellence. So this is helping you to develop a K2 best practice around your deployment. So the steps needed in order to have a successful deployment and how you manage that over time from learning, building, and operating your K2 processes. And then the last piece there is going to be training and certification. So we want to make sure that you have at your fingertips a number of different resources to go and learn about K2 and improve on how you're building your applications and deploying them across your enterprise. And then we have over 300 technology and delivery partners. So that's all the way through our Microsoft, SAP, DocuSign, Box. Those are some things that are people that we work very closely with to make sure that our customers are successful, as well as some global delivery partners. Packaging and pricing, and this is going from, we want to make it very accessible for people to get started with K2, and we don't want price to be a reason that you can't benefit from process automation across your organization. So we kind of scale up here. You can have a rather small deployment and kind of feel it out, get started, all the way through an enterprise deployment. And just note here that the starter package is only available in K2 Cloud. And just one more thing before we jump into our demo. These are just a number of the best companies running on K2, and certainly many of them are SharePoint deployments as well within this customer base. So really a great depiction of successful customers across many solutions and users that are benefiting from process automation. So enough of that. I am now going to turn my slides over and we're going to jump into a live demonstration. I'm going to use an expense claim scenario to kind of take you through what that SharePoint and K2 experience could be like across your organization. So just give me a moment here to switch on over. Okay, so we've spent quite a bit of time introducing K2 and talking about how we can really enhance your SharePoint investment with something like K2 for forms and process automation across SharePoint. So today we're going to be focusing on an expense claim application. And what you see in new is a fairly standard deployment of a SharePoint environment, probably not dissimilar to some of the environments that you might be currently running today. And you'll see just a few K2 parts out of the box. So I have this K2 work list. This is a web part import that I can add to any web app within SharePoint to give my user access to things that might be assigned to them. And this isn't the only way that my user is able to go and grab their items, and we'll kind of talk about that as we go along. So for today's demonstration, again, we're going to be looking at the expense claim. And here you can see that I have a couple of entries that I've already gone and submitted, and we're going to go ahead and create a new expense claim. So we're just going to go ahead and give it a title. We'll say it's October expenses. There we go. And you can see here I have a total amount. So that's actually going to get updated by this expense claim items view down below. And we'll just say, you know, my standard claims for October, just like that. And now I'm going to go ahead and enter a new item. So what you're going to see is that as I add that new item, we are maybe going to say that in October we had a conference expense. And so part of that expense is going to be our lodging. So that might be something like Hyatt. We'll go ahead and enter a date. Maybe that was earlier this month. And we'll just say stay for conference. And then we'll go ahead and enter an amount. So let's just say it's $548. And I can go ahead and add a receipt. So we'll go ahead and add that hotel cost. So what you're going to see is as I commit the changes to that active row, my total amount is actually going to update based on those expenses. So let's just go ahead and we'll add a few more. Maybe we have some airfare around that. We'll call this Alaska Air because I really like Alaska Air. And maybe we purchased that ticket, you know, on Sunday. It was a quick turnaround for that conference. And we'll just say airfare to conference. There we go. And maybe that was $357. Again, we'll go ahead and add another attachment there for our receipt. And maybe our last expense here is our per diem. And we'll just say ourself. And we'll put it towards the end of our trip. Maybe that was the 5th. And we'll just say employee, meals. There we go. And just a flat maybe $250 for the few days that we were at the conference. Okay, at this point, my entry is looking pretty good. You can see I have kind of that parent-child relationship with my header expense claim and some line items. And what's nice within K2 is you can see each one of these cellular components are what we call views. And so I can have 1 to as many views as I need in a forms experience. And these can all use different data sources. So in this case, we're storing our metadata of the request in our SharePoint instance and storing the expense claim line items within a SQL database and kind of bringing it all together here in a single user experience. Okay, so now within the SharePoint experience, I'm going to click Submit. And what that's going to do is actually save these items back to the respective places that they should be stored. So in this case, SharePoint and SQL. And it's also going to kick off a K2 process that's going to govern this as it goes through approval. So we're going to send it to the manager first to make sure that they have a chance to review it, make sure everything's correct. And after that point, if it's over a certain amount, it's actually going to go through an additional approval. In this case, we're not quite at that. So you'll see kind of the decision within our workflow. And then finally, kind of a finance review and approval. Okay, so for purposes of keeping it simple, I'm also just going to stay logged in as the Dynamics administrator, but we'll kind of touch on that routing and some different capabilities there. So again, we're going to go ahead and submit. And it's going to take me back to my SharePoint list. So again, kind of a nice user experience. The deep linking here has been replaced with the K2 Smart Forms. And if I actually go ahead and refresh my list here, you're going to see that I actually started that process. I have a link to open up what we call the view flow, all from right within my SharePoint list. And so the nice thing with SharePoint is it's really up to you and how you want to design that user experience. So if you want it deeply embedded with K2 Smart Forms and workflow, but still the look and feel of SharePoint, we're able to do so without your user even being aware. Or if you want to use SharePoint as kind of a line of business connection, we're able to take the data outside of SharePoint, maybe into kind of a portal-like experience, single pane of glass, and still store the data where it should be stored and give that visibility within SharePoint. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to hit home, and a couple of things have happened. You can see here that I actually started a expense claim workflow just a few moments ago. So we are going to actually click to open that, and the view flow is nice because it actually gives me a kind of running tally of what's happening in this process as it goes along. So here you see it loads up, and this is actually the process that we're going through, and it's going to light up and show me what's happening and where it's paused in the process. You can see in this particular workflow, we have a few kind of preparation steps. We set what's called the folio, so that's a piece of information in the work list that tells me maybe a little bit more about this expense claim as it goes to that approval. You can see our first task here is the manager approve of the expenses. If they make a decision here, it's going to go one of a couple of different paths. You can see here they can reject the request, they can approve the request, or they can query it back to the originator. Maybe there's some changes that they need to make. And we're capturing all that great audit workflow history within a single record. We're not starting subsequent workflows to track all that data. And that becomes a little bit more important as we get into the reporting aspects of this particular request. Okay, so as we go along, we're going to assume that we go the happy path. Maybe we query it to the originator, go through that approval. So we're going to split off here, and you can see if it's over $1,500, it's going to need a secondary approval. If it doesn't, it's going to go right back to update the list item, maybe send an email out, let the originator of the request know that it's been approved, and then we're going to go through finance. So finance can also make a decision here. They could actually reject the request, they could go ahead and approve and close out the item, or maybe they need to do some additional things from a finance standpoint. Maybe they don't have an account set up for that user to go ahead and refund them the money. So we're going to have a hold task, and this could be set on maybe a variable that we have in the workflow. It could be a set amount. Maybe it's 5 minutes. In our case, it's going to be 1 minute. And that allows for kind of a pause to occur within this workflow process. And then you can see at the end, I actually have that end shape. And what's nice here is I can actually end the workflow in multiple locations. I don't have to have a singular endpoint as we go along. Okay, so I'll go ahead and leave this open as we go. And in our portal here, so I could actually open up, I could, in this case, approve, query, reject right from within my work list. Again, I can open the view flow, I could open the form. But what I can also do if I go back to my mail here, and let's make sure we're hitting the right request here, you can see that I can click to open the item right from within my email. I could actually query, approve, or reject right from here. And what I'm actually going to do is click and open that work list item. As you can see here, it actually populates with the details of the request, and this time they're read-only. So this user shouldn't be able to make any changes. We can see that I have a claim audit history, so I can see who is kind of active within the task and what the final action is. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out there. So that's again how I may be bringing that tracking and audit history to the end user as they're kind of seeing things in flight. And we're going to actually query it to the originator, and we're going to say needs a change, add maybe a rental car. Okay, so we're actually going to go the route of query, and I'm going to go ahead and submit. And we'll just go ahead and close that page. And what we're going to see in the view flow is that's actually going to happen live time. So we saw it complete, we made our decision, and it actually went back to the originator for rework. So I'm going to go back, and now as that originator that submitted the request, I'm going to go ahead and open the item from my work list. And again, this is happening maybe from where I'm most comfortable. So now I'm actually able to edit the request. I can see the expense claim comments. So I can see the Denalics administrator said needs a change, add a rental car. Okay, well, that's great. Let's go ahead and we're going to say transportation, and we're going to say maybe something like Avis and give it a date. Maybe it's that first day that we were on site. There we go. And we'll just say transport to conference. And maybe that ended up being, $246. Okay, so we've updated our total amount, still under $1,500, which is that split off, and we'll say added rental car. Perfect. And we'll go ahead and go the route of resubmit. And now we're going to see, again, that lifetime completion back to the manager for those expenses. So in the portal, maybe as that manager now, I'm going back in, I see it's been resubmitted, that same manager approve expenses. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to approve right from our work list. So if we go back to, again, the view flow, what we should see is that we're getting to this decision. We didn't go the route of our second approval there, and we actually are down now in that finance process. So as that finance manager, maybe I get some additional information in my email. So I have an ability in the notification that gets sent to my finance group or any of these user tasks to actually go and send out additional information on that particular entry. So if we go back to the mailbox now as that claim sent for processing, you can see that we are actually getting some additional information. And I could even go as far as maybe generating a PDF. And what they're actually going to do now is you can see I can click to open the work list item. I know the amount, standard claim for October. I know that the manager's already approved it. I'm going to go ahead and on my end, maybe there's a financial system that I need to update. Maybe it's part of this process, but I'm actually going to go ahead and approve. So all I'm going to do is a type into here and go ahead and hit send. And if we go back to that view flow, what we should now get is, again, that decision is going to hit the process. And go ahead and complete there. All right. So with that, we've actually closed out this process. We've approved our expense claim. We've interacted with it within that SharePoint environment, within our email. Another option there might be mobile. We're not going to cover that today, but that's certainly an option when it comes to accessibility of your forms process. Okay, so now that we've taken a look at that runtime, let's do a quick kind of overview of what maybe that design time's like. So I'm actually going to go back over here to my designer. I'm actually going to go back to finance, had another window open here, and we are going to go straight to the expense claim. And as that designer now of this process, if I wanted to go and make a change or maybe just see the assets that are available to me here, all I have to do is click into the list tab and I can see I have some K2 links that exist within SharePoint. So I'm actually going to click the application. And what this is going to do is actually show me the artifacts that have been generated around this expense claim. So in a K2 world, we have kind of 4 components. We talked about the base kind of 4 pillars, and this is going to be our smart objects, our views, our forms, and our workflow. So you can see here, I have a couple of smart objects. So the expense claim main object is going to describe the expense claim from within that SharePoint environment so that I can go and build a view so that users can interact. And I can build a view and reuse it across multiple forms. And you kind of saw some of that today with our line items with the new form and our edit form. So once I have those views, you can see I have my claim line item list, which is the non-editable, and then my edit list, and then a form that's display for any of my approvers. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to actually check out the display form, because I have a change that I want to go and make within that form to maybe update the UI. So I can add one-to-many views to this form. I'm just going to go ahead and edit. And you can see I can right-click. I can use the top link buttons to go ahead and make a change or maybe even create a new form or view. Okay, so we see here I have my header view, and I'm actually pulling that. If I go over here on the left-hand side, these are things that I can add to my canvas. So different views, different toolbox, my selection, and then as I click through, I actually get the properties of the form or a view. So in this case, we actually don't have a footer at the bottom of the view. Or the form, excuse me. So we're actually going to go into this category up here called apps. So what's nice is I don't have to just use the assets that have been created down in our SharePoint list with all of our expense claim items. I'm actually going to reuse a standard footer view, in my framework that I use across all of my solutions. So there's some power here in creating some standard assets that unify the user interface and the experience without having to go and generate this view every time you want to use it. You can create it once and reduce the amount of time that it takes to go and develop. So I'm going to make it not collapsible so that header goes away. And what I'm actually going to do is click on the display claim. So what you may have noticed is as that first initial approver went and clicked submit, they actually didn't click this edit button. So what I'm able to do here is actually hide that button, configure some rules at the view level, and then utilize them at the form level. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the rules tab here, and it shows me, because I'm clicked on that view, all of the rules that have been configured. So let's go take a look at that. I'm going to say on the edit button, I'll go ahead and edit the rule. And this is our rules wizard. So we have kind of 3 components here. I have an event, a trigger to that. So you can see I'm using a button click. It could be when the form is loading. So we call it initialize. So I want to do a set of actions, maybe populate dropdowns or hide and show things based on the current user that's accessing the form. And so I want to, when the edit button is clicked, you can see I'm hiding that button, not using that logic. So I actually want to go down to my submit button, just down here. We'll go ahead and click on that, click on my submit button and edit. And what you're going to see is that I have some rules that aren't editable. And so those are ones that have been configured at the view level. So I can actually go and configure things and then add additional rules and logic at the form level. So I can add conditions. You can see that if some of the areas contain a value, we're going and generating a comment in a common comments object, and then we're going through the approvals. So here you can see I have a manager, second approval, finance approval, and I can even go as far in our actions. Maybe I want to hide a view. And so I could go and maybe add the hide a view. Maybe the finance person doesn't need to see the itemized for whatever reason, so I can go ahead and maybe hide the expense claim line items list. Maybe that's not a good idea. I just want to go ahead and remove that rule and continue on. So I can just click OK. All of the same changes are going to be saved. And when I click Finish, it's actually going to take me back to the summary of all of our items. So that's kind of the quick of the forms design experience. At the view design experience level, I'm able to kind of move my controls around to change up that view to maybe remove something or add something additional. And we won't dive too deep into that today because I know a lot of you may or may not have seen this, but I want to spend a little bit of time within the expense claim workflow design experience. So you can see there, I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and we're going to go ahead and edit. And this is going to go ahead and load up the definition of my workflow. So what's nice here, and this is all new components of K2 that I actually really enjoy, is if I have somebody that's a new designer, I have different flagging and badging that I can turn on in the toolbox in order to kind of guide them through the experience. So this is kind of showcasing what the user can do, and it's not that kind of deer in the headlights blank canvas experience where all of a sudden I have full access to this designer, but I have no idea where I'm supposed to click, how I add objects, how I configure them. And you can see here it's kind of guiding me through where those objects come from, how I go and maybe configure, how I deploy, and then some access to, if I know K2, okay, I can go and see what's changed, or I'm new to K2, go ahead and show me a little bit more. So I can say I've got it, this is going to go away, it won't pop up again, or I could just say close. Maybe you want to leave it active as you get to know K2 a little bit more. So I'm just going to say got it. And what's nice here is you can see that I have an access to drag my shapes, but I can actually collapse that. And maybe on the originator rework, we want to, or maybe even the manager approve expenses, I want to go and configure something a little bit more. So in there, let's go into the notification. You can see I'm sending a standard task notification, but maybe we want to go and customize that. So I'm actually going to pop open my context browser here, and you can see I have a reference to the claim and the items, and a variable to maybe update with comments at certain points in the workflow. And we're just going to say new expense claim for review, just like so. And maybe we want to say something like new claim details, and we'll just say amount and submitter. And so I can go and I can actually expand this expense claim, and I can go and grab the total amount onto my canvas there, and you can see I have this requester, and I'm going to have actually reference to their name. So I'm going to drag that on there, and you can see I very quickly have customized all this. I can collapse that down, and now I have additional real estate. So maybe 1500 and under is going to go through maybe a department review, rather than maybe our over 1500 is going to go to a VP, for instance. So maybe I want to go ahead and I'm going to drag another user task here. And you can see that I'm actually getting some badging and flagging because I need to go and configure something on the canvas. So I'm going to collapse that. I'm going to connect these two objects. And I can actually very quickly model out my workflow and maybe a new direction. So maybe we want to go way out here. I'm actually going to drag a shape. I'm going to add the decision. And what you're going to see is this has what we call reasonable defaults, but it's going to badge again the things that I need to go and update. So maybe I want to update the list item. So I can actually go into my SharePoint items here, the list item, and then I want to go ahead and update the list item. Maybe I want to go back to my toolbox here. I want to send an email. And you can see I can go back into my basics here. So maybe I want to set the folio or reset the folio. Maybe I want to call a different workflow. Maybe I want a placeholder, that timer event, all the way through calling specific smart objects. So if I have something maybe within my SQL that I want to go and update, or a different object, I'm able to do that all from within this canvas. And then let's see. So what we're going to do here on the user task is we're going to go back and configure it. So I'm going to click onto this top here, and maybe we want both. So you can see now, if I go back to my canvas, that those two badging errors actually went away. So let's go ahead and delete our decision one. That wasn't what we actually wanted to do. Whoops, and oh no, I deleted my shape. Well, I can actually drag it back on, and what it's going to do smartly is know my approved and reject. I can actually just add that there. Maybe for this one, I want to go and go use the same end step over here, and then I want to connect it back over here. So again, I'm able to very quickly model out the changes that I'm making. Maybe I want to, again, I have referenced that expense claim item, and now I'm going to pick the properties that I want to update. So in this case, it might be something like status that we've been updating this entire time, and we want to say, you know, status of approved, collapse that out. And now at this time, you can see I can collapse everything away, have a bigger view of my canvas. That all goes away, and I could go and very quickly publish this back out. So I will leave this here as it is, and I'm just going to hit close instead of deploying that new workflow. I'll go back and maybe remove those steps later if I need to. The next thing that I like when it comes to SharePoint is going to be the settings right here. So if I click on the form settings, this actually shows me how I'm replacing that deep linking within SharePoint. So I could use kind of that mirror when I generate items to say I want to use the new form, the edit form, or the display. Maybe I want to use something that actually is a redirect if they don't have correct permissions for this item, or maybe I don't want them to be able to edit through the edit link, and I can link to the display and let them know that they have to use the workflow task in order to edit an item. Okay, perfect. So the last item that I actually want to cover here is some reporting and management, because these are both extremely important components when it comes to the data that you're capturing here. So I'm actually going to click on report, and what you're going to see is, because I haven't created any reports around this item, it's actually going to go and generate some default reports for me that I can go in and customize with some K2 objects. So that's kind of giving you a really quick way to get insights into what's happening in your process. This might take a moment. And now I can just click OK. And then those reports are going to be generated for me, and it's actually going to redirect me to those reports. So now I can see the amount of workflows that have started, and I can start to drill down. So I can click here, it's going to list all of the workflows. I can open up the view flow, maybe on a specific one. I want to see the activity instances, what's happened. If I click on a user task, it's going to tell me who performed those actions. But if we go into management, we're going to get an even kind of deeper look here. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh. It's going to show me any running instances that are happening on my current instance. I could start a new, I could go ahead and open up the view flow. And again, this is something that's going to be really good for debugging. If I go into rights, this gives me who has access to go and start a process. If I'm debugging, again, I can see all the errors, another good tool there. And then also the reporting when it comes to what's happening in this process, and I can go in and I can embed this somewhere else for my end users. And what's nice is I can actually go and start to filter down based on a date parameter. So maybe I want to say this week, maybe I want to say the last 7 days. And it's going to give me slightly different information based on what I select. So this is total instances, activity process instance, how many activities, all the way to how many instances, what activities are maybe taking the longest. You can see here maybe our finance, they've got a lot of backlog. And I can click down into that finance process and get a better idea of what's happening and where my bottlenecks exist in the process. If I click just back to our management home here, what you're going to see is there's a few kind of links that are going to be very useful as you're managing K2 across this deployment. And so this could be things like workflow rights, working hours, maybe specific K2 roles. Maybe I want to set up integrations. Really, the possibilities are endless here, and I'm going to keep it very short today. So I hope that this was very insightful and kind of exploring how K2 and SharePoint can really work together to deliver much more robust solutions for your end users. I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to my slides and go ahead and wrap up today's presentation. Okay, so with that, I'd like to go ahead and open up the session for a little bit of Q&A. So please use the Q&A chat box to go ahead and submit your questions if you haven't already been submitting them as we've been going along. And I'll give folks a few minutes to do so. If you have a rather long question, just send me a quick ping and let me know, hey, I'm working on my longer question, and we'll give you some additional time. All right, thank you, everyone.